Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with debut author Meg Hamand. Meg, you're the author of Diamonds in Auschwitz, and
Yes.
I'm very glad to be talking with you about this book and this time period that's very important to share about for listeners.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Yeah, glad to have you. Uh, I usually ask a question at the beginning that's sort of an origins question. There's something about
Mhm.
that connection to the written word that really fascinates me. As I mentioned before we hit record, I'm an English teacher, literacy person. So, what was it about stories and storytelling that initially connected you with the world of writing?
I think that it's just such a way to escape and learn all these different places. I want to go everywhere. I want to learn everything. And books can do that from the comfort of your couch in your own home. So I've always been an avid reader. We just did an event for the book launch a few weeks ago, and people said, "When did you start reading?" And my mom was kind of like, "I'm going to interject here and start to say she was reading classics when she was in third grade." So I've always loved the written word. And now I'm at the point where there's stories that I want to know more about, but they're not out there. So I feel like maybe I've got to be the one to write them because I've just got so many questions about different time periods and characters and situations. So now it's my turn to start to write things so others can read it.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. That's sort of a spin on Toni Morrison's thing of find the story that you want to read
Mhm.
and then write it, the questions that drive you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah, yeah. Now, this book in particular there's some emotion here that we'll explore. There's some history. What was the spark that got you interested in composing Diamonds in Auschwitz?
I was reading a book by Wendy Holden called Born Survivors, and it's nonfiction about women who were pregnant and went into Auschwitz and gave birth and their survival stories. And there was just this one little line, this little anecdote about one of the mothers had held on to this engagement ring through the Nazi occupation and living in the ghettos. And as she's walking into the concentration camp, she's like, I am not letting the Nazis have this ring. So she
Mhm.
dropped it out in the dirt outside of the gates. And that was not the point of the book, right? But I loved that image and I just kept thinking about it. And I thought, if you're a prisoner in that camp and you found this ring, what would that do for you? It's not going to change your life. You can't use it to get out of the camp. It's not going to bring you warmth. It's not going to bring you any food. You can't trade it for its value. But, there's always still a value in art and beauty. And how could that change your life? And so that's what started the story. And then on the flip side, how did it get there, right? Like, what did it take for somebody? And this feels like just the smallest, tiny little bit of resistance against the Nazis. But the fact that someone was able to hold on to it all this time and at the very end thought, you know what? No, I'm still not going to let them have it. And how, resisting them in just that small way, how that can change someone's life and give them purpose. So it's those two stories, the woman who picks it up and the woman who had held on to it up until that very end. And they overlap, and as you read the book, there are times where they might even connect. And so it's kind of a fun guessing game to see, like, I'm reading about these two women. Are they ever going to meet?
Yeah, yeah. What a great metaphor for sort of the beauty that we have inside us and the resilience to not give over completely and to not allow ourselves to be oppressed or consumed in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, the ring is supposed to be kind of the physical embodiment of that. And every chapter that I wrote, I mentioned the ring at some point in different ways. And at some point, it's just a quick little mention. And some point, kind of the chapter is crafted around something with that ring, but that was very intentional. So hopefully people don't feel like I hit them over the head with it.
Motifs are good. Motifs are good. That's what I teach my students anyway. Uh, so love that idea of some sort of beauty in the ashes. I mentioned that I was reading Night by Elie Wiesel with my students right now with one of my groups. And certainly an emotional topic, very heavy. And I'm wondering how you process both the historical side with research, but also all of the emotions that come with writing in this time period.
Yeah, I did a lot of research. And so my characters are completely fictional, but everything that they've experienced is based in fact. And honestly, the most horrific things that happened to them, the parts that were the hardest to write, I couldn't make that up. That did not come from my imagination. That all came from lots of research. Some of it specifically for this book, and some of it just for my own reading, right? You know, I'm an avid reader, fiction and nonfiction. So some of it was images that had stuck with me for a long time, and I had to get them back out and put them on paper. So actually, some of the most horrific things, again, like I don't have the imagination to come up with that, but I had read about it in multiple cases that, you know, the Nazis had done these terrible things. So it's almost kind of like a cop out because I was like, I can't make this up. But it also is really important, I think, that it is said, that it's written, that it's remembered, that people read it, even though it's uncomfortable and it's hard to digest. And I've had so many people say, I got to this part in your book and I had to put it down and take a break and pick it up the next day. I've heard that consistently. And I don't want to say that I like it when people tell me I made them cry, but it is important because that part is true, and we need to know about that and remember it.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with putting a book aside, coming back to it, processing that. I think that's kind of a compliment to the craft, but also just a statement of the importance of the ideas that are there too.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, with that in mind, I was going to ask what you hope people continue to ask, what they continue to think about. And you mentioned that this was part of a process for you of answering questions and exploring for yourself. But what's something that you hope that readers continue to circle around when they're finished with reading?
Yeah, I really focused on the question or the idea of if there's nothing left of me, you know, especially in this specific time period, if the Nazis actually killed me, they kill my entire family, my home is gone, everything that I knew was gone, did I ever really exist? Like, what was the purpose of being here on Earth? And so that's the biggest question that is haunting the character who picks up the ring, Rachel. In the first few pages, you find out that she's a prisoner in Auschwitz, and had, you know, three kids and a husband, and they are all gone. And she is ready to die. She just wants to join them. She doesn't want to be here anymore. Obviously, is living this horrific life. But when she wakes up, when she finds the ring and she starts to notice life around her, she thinks, if I'm gone, nobody's ever going to remember my children's names. Did they exist? And I think this idea of living on, you know, beyond our time on Earth is really important, especially if you think of literally the millions of people that died during the Holocaust, and it wiped out entire families, entire villages, entire populations. So just kind of what can we leave behind that's going to make an impact on the future?
Absolutely. Those questions of lineage and what matters. Very, very
Mhm.
well said. Yeah. Now, this was your debut author experience. What has that been like? I'm curious.
Overwhelming. It has been very overwhelming. You know, you think that you write a book and then you just, you know, someone slaps a cover on it and you move on. And I'm finding that is not the experience. Writing the book might have been the easier part. The publishing journey is full of ups and downs, especially for a first time writer. And I probably made some missteps because I just didn't know the industry very well. I still probably don't know it that well. So I'm learning. And then, you know, I thought on publication day, we'll just, you know, toast with a glass of champagne and that'll be it. And I didn't know that you obsessively watch your numbers on Amazon rankings
Oh,
and
yeah.
and then you know, you do podcasts and radio interviews. And this has been really fun, but not what I thought the life of a writer was going to be.
Yeah, yeah, that public side of getting to attend different spaces,
Yeah.
absolutely, and get to be the voice for the book.
Yeah, it's been really fun and I've gotten to do some really cool things already. It's just I just really want to be at my computer working on the next book.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that leads into my final two-part question, which is what is
Yeah.
next and where can we find out more?
Yeah, so I actually just finished the first draft, which is, still really the beginning, but I just finished the first draft
Hmm.
of my second book. No publishing deals out there on it yet. I haven't even sent it to anybody besides my best friend down the street. And that is actually going to take place in Charleston right after the Revolutionary War.
Nice.
I went on a haunted night tour in Charleston, which is, one of the best things about that city, all the fun ghost stories that you can hear. And one story had really stuck with me, and I just had more questions about it, right? Like we talked about at the very beginning. I wanted to know more. How did this happen? What was it like for this person who really was the guilty party? And so I just thought, well, I'm going to write it. And I wanted to include some Revolutionary War information. So we kind of we visit um, the swamp fox who really made life terrible for the British troops in Charleston, and we talk about slavery, and we see the sugar mill, which was a horrific place where slaves were kept when they were being punished, and we talk about women's rights in the early 1800s, and then there's a lot of old Charleston ghost legends kind of mixed in. So there's a lot going on. Kind
Yeah.
of stuck it all in a pot and stirred it up, and I'm not really sure how it's going to turn out, but it's been fun to write.
Well, cool. Very cool. Lots of history there to explore, and I'm sensing
Yeah.
the historical author perspective. I'm sensing that.
That's my genre. That's where I will stick. I've got a couple of starts of a few other novels, and they're all met in history, and they all come from a story or a book that I read where I just get just the introduction of something, and I think, but that sounds really cool. I wish this book went more into detail on that. So either I'm just going to have to research it and write it, or I'm just going to have to make it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, interesting things, and I'm sure the research process continues as you're digging into these topics and manuscripts. And you mentioned multiple drafts, which is always nice for people to hear because good
Yeah.
writing doesn't just happen. It's a process by all means.
Yeah. Yeah. And the research for me is half the fun. When I went to college for creative writing in English, I thought I actually wanted to do like creative nonfiction, kind of like a Truman Capote in Cold Blood. That was my favorite book. I did a lot of research on that in college, and I'm a big fan of Eric Larson, who does some really great nonfiction novels. But boy, that's a lot of work. That is a lot of research. I mean, that is years of research before you can even put pen to paper. So I kind of like the historical fiction where I can do the research, but then I can and fill in the gaps as I see fit. I can play with the timeline. I can throw in, interesting characters that I think will spice up the story a little bit. So I really enjoy this, but doing the research and learning things has been so amazing. I mean, working with Diamonds in Auschwitz, I learned about Prague. I didn't know anything about Prague, the city in general, but especially kind of its place during World War II. I learned about the ghetto outside of Prague, Terezin, which was really fascinating because it was populated with with Jewish artists and professors and musicians. So it was supposed to be this great it was sold as the Führer's gift to the Jews. It was supposed to be this great kind of utopia to ride out the war, which of course it wasn't, right? It was a
Mhm.
ghetto and it was just as deadly as any of the other ghettos that we had heard about. But it really had this focus on art and literature and beauty. And I stumbled upon that ghetto after I had already decided that my book was going to be about that. So that was serendipity and just pure dumb luck. But learning about the people in the ghetto and just kind of its entire existence was amazing. It was a great experience.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. And um, the other part of that question was where people can go, if there are particular websites, if you have social media, if there are places in person that people can connect, anything like that by means of connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a great website that a dear friend of mine has been manning for me for the last few years, and it's meghamandauthor.com. Meg Hamand is Hamand. author.com. So meghamondauthor.com is my website, which has the information where you can find Diamonds in Auschwitz and then a little tidbit on my next upcoming novel. And I'm also active on Instagram and Facebook, just under Meg Hamand. So that's where I post a lot of updates and upcoming events. I'm in Northern Indiana, kind of between Chicago and Indianapolis. So that's where a lot of my in-person events are focused and in my hometown, but I've got a few in Indianapolis. So if you're in the Indy area, see me in the next few weeks. I've got two events coming up.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Have we missed anything that you want to make sure to share as part of the interview?
No, check out the book. I think it's a beautiful book and the cover is gorgeous and you'll learn a lot about some unknown characters in history that are factual that I think are really worth reading about.
Absolutely. Well, many thanks. Certainly glad to have you back anytime on the writing journey
Yeah.
and glad to share about your work.